As soon as I open it, roaches. To where when I walk in the house,
did you scream?
You don't know my life, bro.
Welcome back to Econix Talks, guys.
When I pop up, everybody gonna be like, man, overnight success.
Lifestyle topics, entrepreneurship, and investing.
Are you serious about this? Because if you are, then I'm willing to back the business.
We want to inform you, educate you, and empower you so that you can maximize your life. Let's get started. What's up, everybody? I want to give a huge shout out to all the new supporters that have joined us this year, and I can never forget my day one, so shout out to y'all too. As most of you guys know, running an independent podcast takes a ton of time and energy. Now, if you ever benefited from an episode of this show or mini episodes and you'd like to support, you can do that by buying us a coffee. You can reach that by the support link in the show notes, or if you're following me or Econix on Instagram, it'll be in the link in the bio. And this will be used to cover any expenses that come with the show. I appreciate everything you guys have done, and this has been such a fulfilling year. Now, on to this episode. Welcome back to another episode of Econix Talks. I'm your host, Joshua Bent. Today, we're going to get right into it, man. Let's talk about these tariffs. This has been a huge talking point over the last few weeks, over the last month. So let's get into it so that way we can kind of, look at what's going on, what's the real, what's myth. Because right now we're hearing a lot of politicians talk about tariffs like it's just some quick fix to protect American jobs. But, what if I told you that they're really a hidden tax that affects a lot more than we actually realize? So here's what we can expect from this episode. So today we're going to break down what tariffs are. We're going to talk about what current tariffs what current tariff news is going on and how this is going to affect consumers and business owners in the current economy. So first things first, let's talk about what an actual tariff is. So what is a tariff? Well, it's this word that gets tossed around and people don't really understand, what it means. So the simple definition for a tariff is it's a tax that's placed on imported goods. So it makes foreign products more expensive, and it encourages consumers to buy domestic products and shift over to homemade products. So it's all it is, y'all, is a tax. So the purpose of a tariff. So when we start to, meaning we as the U.S., when we start to issue or levy tariffs, the goal of a tariff is very simple. It's meant to protect local industries from foreign competition. Also, if the government's looking to generate income or generate money, revenue, they use tariffs to do that. Also, tariffs are a huge thing that's used to leverage in trade negotiations. So, when it comes to a trade war, nobody wins in a trade war. It's expensive for people. It's expensive for the consumers. But in this situation, they're definitely leveraging the tariffs so that way we can, trade and negotiate with other countries. So an example of a tariff, here's an example. So let's say you have a 25% tariff on steel that's been imported from China. Well, what that means is that U.S. companies are going to pay 25% more for that steel that we are bringing in from China. Now, what this does is it increases costs for industries like construction and automotive. Why? Well, construction, when you're building things, well, they use a lot of steel, and so does the automotive industry. What that means is when the companies that utilize steel, well, they got to pay a little bit of extra to get that steel into the country. So why do tariffs matter? Well, what's the big deal about tariffs? Well, one thing is it does have an effect on us, the consumer. So higher prices is one of the biggest effects that it'll have on consumers. So in this example that I gave you about the steel, so when a company imports that steel and they're going to pay 25% more, well, the company that imports that tariff, they more times than not, they're going to pass off that extra cost to the consumer, meaning us. So if they got to pay a little bit of extra, well, guess what? They're going to charge us some extra as well, because they have people to pay. They have a business to run. So naturally, if their price point just went up, so will ours. So if you look at examples, electronics, we import a lot of electronics, clothing, some groceries, meaning some products that we don't produce here. We get them from other countries. Cars, that's a big one. And we'll talk about that. We'll go in a little bit more detail a little later in this episode. So another effect is it gives consumers less options. So when, obviously right now, let's say, for example, we wanted to shop for the best shirt. And so obviously we can go to Canada, we can go to China, we can go to Budapest, anywhere in the world. We can go import a shirt. But if the taxes if there are taxes on these imported goods, well, a lot of consumers will start to look at domestic options, which may not present a huge variety, essentially. So obviously, because let's say you're dealing with a specific industry and industry standard is to import, well, then a lot of those companies will have to make those shifts. And so naturally consumers will look for domestic options. It's less of those. So when it comes to businesses, tariffs are not, I won't say they're not that good, man. I'm not going to say that they don't have a purpose, but when you have, homegrown businesses, a lot of times they may end up having higher input costs. So what that means is manufacturers, people that make stuff, when they rely on imported goods and imported parts, they're going to see their margin shrink. If they have to pay more for that steel, well, that margin of profitability starts to go down. So they have a higher input cost. Also, supply chain shifts. So let's say, for example, you have a company that may be sourcing coffee, and they source it locally, or they source it from, let's say, Brazil or India, wherever they get their coffee from. Well, let's say that India has a higher tariff than Brazil. Well, they more than likely will shift over to a country who either has a less percentage on their tariff, or they don't have any tariff at all. So they may just outsource their business and their imports from that country. And that in turn could have an effect on, depending on the industry, on quality of product. It could have an effect on, even, let's say you're importing chicken. You might not have the best chicken, or you might have better chicken. You might have to pay more for chicken. But at the end of the day, the companies themselves are going to do what's best for their bottom line. So they're going to try to find somebody where they don't have to pay as much money. Now, who's hit the most, right? Who gets affected the most by tariffs? Well, guess what? Small businesses. And small businesses are one of the biggest components of middle class America. And unfortunately, they get hit the hardest. Well, why is that? Very simple. Big corporations can absorb a lot of these costs a lot better than these mom and pop shops. Very simple. You got more money. Well, you can deal with more ups and downs and more swings in these types of situations. So a lot of mom and pop shops will be affected by these tariffs because they just can't afford to have their margins shifted that much. And so it's unfortunate, but we will see some businesses close up shop because they just can't afford the margins. They're not being able to make their money. Now, the effects that this has on the job market, well, some jobs may be protected, like, U.S. steel or textiles, and then other jobs, they might be lost. So think of jobs like retail or manufacturing. In these sectors, these industries rely heavily on imported goods. So, companies might do layoffs, things like that. Tariffs have a huge effect on inflation. So this is a huge reason why tariffs matter. Nobody likes inflation. When inflation is high, well, guess why your eggs cost what they cost. Everybody's, complaining about, dang, I got to pay all this much for eggs and these different goods. Well, it's because inflation is going up, which makes goods and things that we buy overall, they make them more expensive, right? So they make them more expensive. So what's actually going on, right? What are some current events? Obviously, we're talking about tariffs, but what's the nitty gritty? So what's happening right now is you're seeing a president who has his foreign policy is to essentially, based on what we've been told. Now, what we've been told and what's actually being done is they could be the same or they could have different goals. But what we know right now is the president has we have a deficit, and we have a deficit, I mean, a couple $1 trillion, it's up there, but the deficit is really high. And so what the president is essentially attempting to do is level the playing field by levying these tariffs on a lot of these countries. So I'm not sure if you guys are familiar, but over the last, I would say 2 years, 3 years, there's a lot of countries understand that from a military perspective, they can't really touch us. Why? Well, we spend, if you look at our budget allocation, when we do the budget every year, most of our budget goes towards our military. So naturally, we have a very, very strong military. So a lot of countries, they ain't trying to mess with us. I'm just be real. So a lot of people, I'm scared, or we might get attacked. And I'm not saying this can't happen. It's definitely happened before. What I'm saying is the likelihood of this happening the percentage of that goes down simply because most countries, I ain't saying everybody now, but a lot of countries, they ain't trying to mess with us just because they know we will bomb them back to the Stone Age. And so that's a big deal right now. So with the deficit and with countries not wanting to compete with us from a military standpoint, instead, they will try things like economics. So, for example, the creation of BRICS. And so BRICS is a conglomerate of a few different countries who essentially came together in hopes to affect the U.S. economically to try to, I would say, to push us out, right? Because we hold such we pretty much run the world when it comes to economics. And if our markets are down, a lot of times the world might be down. And obviously, we aren't the only player. We aren't the only major player in this as well. So China is another one that is a world leader as well. So when you have other countries trying to figure out how to handicap us from an economic standpoint, well, this could be a potential response to that, to essentially call people out and say, all right, if y'all gonna go together and do all of this, well, this is what I'm going to do. And this is how we're going to respond. We just going to tariff the hell out of y'all and make you pay for it. So that's essentially what's happening right now. So there's a lot of tension going on. There's a trade war going on. So there's a lot of ongoing tensions with China. So they just levied more tariffs on us just the other day in response to Trump's in response to his tariffs on them. Now, these proposed tariffs that China has levied on us, they're going to affect things like vehicles and semiconductors. I'll break down what that means. So a lot of times, when we all know foreign cars are better made cars than a lot of our domestic cars. So a lot of people prefer Honda. They prefer Toyota over more over these domestic brands simply because they're just better made. But with these tariffs, they're going to push up the price of that, which means it's going to have an effect on the automotive industry because they import so many parts outside of the US. It's because it costs more to manufacture them here. So that's on the automotive side. Now, semiconductors, that's the AI stuff, y'all. That's the AI stuff. So a lot of tech companies are using semiconductors to facilitate whatever they got going on. So if you're looking in the AI space and in the tech space, semiconductors, when AI started to really, really go crazy last year, semiconductors and those types of funds did as well. Well, with semiconductors being manufactured, most of them outside of the US, well, that's going to affect those imports of those semiconductors and may slow down some of the development. For example, Nintendo, right? They just announced that they will be dropping the new Wii. So one of the things is, well, they announced a pause on the production because they don't know how the tariffs will affect their bottom line, meaning they're gonna have to pay more to produce more units to sell. And so that's essentially what a semiconductor does, because a semiconductor is just a component that goes into a Nintendo. And if you want to do more research on semiconductors, you go for it. Go for it. So in 2024 and 2025, there were some trade talk focuses from obviously Mexico, Canada, the EU, and they were reassessing previous trade deals. And so obviously now with the president, levying more tariffs on Mexico and Canada, as you saw last month, he gave them deadlines to kind of figure out what they wanted to do. And he's strong arming them. He knows some of these countries can't compete with us, but some countries can. So you can bully some, but you can't bully them all. And so what this is doing is they have a push for a made in America type of policy. So now you might start to see policies where companies will be incentivized and get, breaks to produce things here. So it will, I will say it will increase use for domestic products, but that doesn't make them cheaper. That just means they will be made and sold here. Because at the end of the day, our standard of living in the U.S. may be different from another country. So we might make more, and more times than not, we do make more, which pushes up that cost of living and the ability for companies to have to charge a certain amount just because they got to pay people a certain amount. It's cheaper to manufacture things outside of the U.S. So with China, like we saw the other day when Trump announced his tariffs, well, there were some retaliatory tariffs that China leveraged on us. So this is when other countries say, you know what, if y'all gonna do that to me, well, guess what? I'm about to run that same thing back to you. So I'm gonna slap some tariffs on those US goods. So anything you want to import, anything you want to bring into your country, well, United States, you got to pay for it. Just because you're making us pay for it, well, we can run that and we'll play that game. So when we look at tariffs and when we look at those kinds of things, that's essentially how the current events are going. So there's a lot of uncertainty right now. We don't really know exactly what's going to happen. Nobody can predict the future. But what I can say is when I say they, meaning the government and his cabinet, they understand what they're doing. When decisions like this are being made at such a high level, they know the ramifications of what they're doing. So they know that the stock market may go down. They know that all of these different issues will essentially persist on until they decide to change their policy stance. But as of right now, well, the president don't really care. He has a goal in mind, and that's what he's going for. So some real world examples, right, of tariffs. So Apple, they import a lot of components to put together their phones, their laptops, their iPods. Yes, they still sell iPods. So even Apple Watches, a lot of these components, a lot of these parts come from Asia. So as we just discussed, when tariffs are levied on companies like Apple, well, guess what? Again, they're going to have to charge us more because they have to pay more to produce and create and make these products. So because their production costs went up, they're just going to pass that over to the consumer. What that means is you might see a lot of consumers, and they're already doing it in the cell phone industry and in the wireless industry. They're holding on to their phones longer. They're not upgrading as much. They're not buying as many new phones. So one of the things that Apple has done is they've shifted some of their manufacturing to India. So that goes back to the what I talked about earlier when I talked about supply chain shifts. So Apple's response to the tariffs was a supply chain shift, and they started to go to India because they more than likely have a smaller, or their tariff is less in India. Now, farmers, they have been hit by some of these retaliatory tariffs from China, and think about like soybeans. So obviously anything that we import, if farmers are selling these things and they want to import from other countries and things like that, well, they got to pay extra for that. They got to pay more for that, which is that's why your eggs are going up, right? That's why other products are going up in grocery stores. Now, we talked about the automotive industry. Tariffs have a huge effect on the automotive industry. Now, why? It's simple, but we import a ton of steel and aluminum to manufacture our cars. And so because we import so many of those parts to put together our vehicles, well, again, they're going to charge us more. So we got to charge the consumers more. Companies will charge the consumers more. So you will see increases in car prices as well. So everybody wants to know, how are these tariffs affecting the stock market? So as you've already seen, if you haven't, I don't know if you guys follow the stock market pretty closely, but if you look at the Dow Jones, or if you look at the S&P 500, the volatility that these tariffs have had on the stock market over the last, I would say, week or so has not been good. Meaning, what that means is the market sentiment as a whole, they don't like this. They don't like it at all. This is not good for people's 401ks. This is not good for people who have money in the market. It's going down. So what you see is all of these different trade war announcements, they cause market dips. So you'll start to see, I believe Apple, Amazon, a lot of these major companies, Google, Microsoft, have lost significant amounts of percentages in their stock. It's simply because the market don't like this. I don't know how else how else to simplify that anymore. So with that being said, you're going to see tech stocks, manufacturing stocks. So Ford, General Motors, all of these different car companies, you're going to see that their stocks are going to be hit the most. And so if you look at, the Magnificent Seven, if you look at all of the leading stocks in our country and companies, you'll see that a lot of them are tech stocks. And so because tech stocks drive what we call growth, when tech stocks drive growth, well, when you see a dip in their production, then as a whole, the whole market tends to be down, and then other industries tend to follow, who may be impacted as like a secondary to Apple being impacted. So there's a lot of volatility in the market. Now, as an advisor, what I will tell you is this: when it comes to a lot of the uncertainty in stocks, and when you look at investing, I'm gonna just keep it real with y'all. There will be a lot of millionaires made during this time. And I will say that every time that there's a correction in the market, when there's dips in the market, that is the best time to buy. So, for example, if you look at your 401k and you look at your investments, whatever you're holding right now, look at it and understand, like right now, let's say, for example, and again, I want to be very clear, this is not investment advice. I'm just using this as an example. So let's say you invested in Apple, for example, and you bought their stock. Let's see what Apple's trading at right now. So what is Apple trading at? Let's see what Apple is trading at right now. So Apple is currently trading at $188.38. So let's say, and this again, an example. Let's say, for example, a year ago, Apple was trading at $250 a share. Well, if they were trading at $250 a share and you bought it then, great, but you bought it at a higher price. Well, right now, because there's been a dip in the market, well, you just got Apple on a discount, or you can get a lot of different investments or stocks for discounts. So guess when the best time to invest? Well, now. So as crazy as that sounds, and as backwards as that sounds to a lot of people, because they look at the stock market and they see the volatility, they see it going down. So naturally, people who are not as educated on how the market moves, that may scare them and they may sell off their positions. But let me tell you this: you don't technically lose money until you actually liquidate your position. Meaning, if you have a stock or you own a share of a company and it goes down 10%, well, if you sell it, then you lost your money. But if you hold that stock and it goes back up, then you didn't lose any money. So if it dropped 10% and it went back up 10%, you essentially lost nothing. So what that means is when you're investing, when you're looking at your portfolios, you want to have a long-term outlook on the market. Ultimately, this downshift or downturn in the market is not caused by anything other than politics. It's a government spurred type of drop in the market, meaning it's control. We can control this. So if he changed his policies, guess what would happen tomorrow? The market sentiment would immediately change because the stock market is sensitive to news. What that means for us is you want to leverage something called dollar cost averaging. Some of y'all already know what this is. And for those who don't, all dollar cost averaging means is when you purchase stocks, when you invest, you want to always invest. You want to invest consistently. This is about consistency. So for example, let's say you bought Apple at 150. You bought it at a discount. Let's say you bought it again in 6 months at 250. Well, you might have bought it at a higher price. But if you consistently purchase stocks, if you consistently purchase different stocks and different things in the market, well, you're going to buy them at higher prices. You're going to buy them at lower prices. You're going to buy them at medium prices. But the average price that you pay for a stock or for that particular share typically will go down, which means if you consistently invest, the average that you spend on your shares is less than the consumer who is just trying to time the market, meaning they just want to buy it at the right time. There's no such thing. I mean, there is a such thing as buying at the right time. But if you aren't an expert, if you aren't a day trader, if you ain't trying to be all into that, you just want to make sure that you have solid principles that can get you where you need to be, then the principle that you should focus on is dollar cost averaging. So that way you can also buy when there's a dip in the market. So for those of you who are concerned about what's going on out here in the world, well, now's a great time to buy if you got some extra money. Now's also a great time to start bolstering up your emergency fund. So if you don't have enough cash on hand, you need to start saving more. You need to start budgeting more. Look at other alternatives for your food sources or different brands that you may buy. You may need to go to the generic brand, just because some stuff is just too much. And so that's essentially what the market impact has been. And so, just to wrap this up, I wanted to just kind of, do a high level overview of how the stock market works. So tariffs might sound like a government issue, but they do hit closer to home than a lot of people realize, from your grocery bills to, again, prices of cars. So these politics, they can trickle down in ways that affect your everyday life. So again, what you should be focused on. So right now, your main focus during this uncertain time should be, one, to stay informed, which is why I think it's important that I drop episodes and give out information like this to help people understand what's going on. So stay informed, understand what goods are being affected. If you want some examples of what pages to follow, Yahoo Finance is a good one. Bloomberg, all of these different businesses. If you on Instagram, favorite them, add them to your close friend. Not close friends, but add them to your favorites so you can start to see some of this stuff. I wouldn't overconsume on a lot of news sources just simply because you don't want to get scared. You don't want to. There's a lot of fear out there, and so a lot of news sources may put out fear. They may put out things that can cause people to be scared, which is why you see a lot of people selling off in the market and selling their shares. So stay informed, understand what's being affected so that way you can make your adjustments. You don't have to be an expert, but you do need to understand how this affects your daily life because tariffs will and can lead to price increases. So knowing this helps you anticipate how to budget accordingly. Now, adjust your spending habits, right? So again, if prices on certain imports are going up, well, consider putting off some of your major purchases, meaning homes. Consider putting off purchasing your new car Why? Because, well, it's not an essential, right? It's not important right now. Especially if you're in a position where you absolutely need a car, go for it. But if you're not in that position and you want to, you're looking at purchasing a new car, you might want to hold off on that and just explore some alternatives. So support local. So when it makes sense, when it does make sense, buy local. Tariffs are designed to push consumers towards local goods. So just make sure you are not overpaying in the process of buying from your local vendors. Watch your investments. We just talked about the stock market. Keep an eye on the market volatility, because with all of these different trade tensions, this can and will affect your portfolio. So you want to make sure that you stay diversified. When I say diversification or diversified, all that means is if you're running your own, and again, I don't want to knock anybody for running their own trades and running their own accounts. But if you are in a position to run your own account and you're doing well, go for it. I have no problems with that. But for those of you who don't necessarily have an expertise in this type of field, then you want to talk to a professional like myself or somebody else. If you know somebody else in the financial advising space, well, you want to talk to a professional and they will make it make sense. And so when you diversify, if you buy one stock and it goes down, then that's where all your money is, meaning you put all your eggs in one basket. But if you invest in things like mutual funds, they will put you in a position to diversify your portfolio. So your money and your income and all your investments are spread out over multiple industries. So if Apple is affected heavily, well, guess what? Utility companies may not be as affected. So you might want to put more of your income into something like that. Again, this is not investment advice, just giving out examples. So stay diversified. Talk to your advisor about your sector exposure. If you don't have an advisor, that's when you call me. Now, the last thing, you want to have an emergency fund, and this is where your discipline comes in. So uncertainty in the trade market, uncertainty with all of these different things, they can bleed into employment. So again, companies might shift over and they might lay off people. Inflation might be going up. And so over the next 3 to 6 months, just make sure that you are budgeting and all of your variable expenses, meaning expenses that you can control. Eating out, you can control that. Your subscriptions, you can control that. Those are variable expenses. So over the next couple of months, just keep an eye on that and do a budget review. So that way you can make sure that you are not overspending and you have enough saved up just in case something happens. So to close, whether you are a business owner or you just trying to make your dollar stretch a little bit, well, these decisions, they impact everybody. So just make sure you stay sharp, stay flexible, keep learning. And at the end of the day, stay informed. And with that being said, this is another episode of Econix Talks. Like, share, subscribe. Y'all know the drill. And again, thank you all for your support. All right. Y'all have a good one. Peace.